All right, I'll say let's get it rolling. All right, so welcome again to the Cox Communications Academic Student Support Summit. So we have Jay Beasley here, who's going to be doing the universal design for learning and communication centers. And so just want to let you all know that we do have closed captioning that you can activate it. If you select live, the more, and then transcript, and then subtitles, you can get that activated on your screen. And so Jay is going to be doing more of a kind of open discussion. So as you all have questions, definitely feel free to just kind of hop in and facilitate within this session. And without further ado, after some conversation with Jay and just the things that they talked about and just their background and things that they've been through, I think it's gonna be a pretty cool session. So I'll hand it over to Jay and they'll take it from there.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for showing up. I just kind of want to get started with a couple of things. Just kind of preface, how I got into the research that I do, why I do it, things like that. I've always been interested in advocacy, and I began with special needs kids. That's kind of my pigeonhole in my future career. I work with a lot of autistic students, and I recently found out within this last year that I am also autistic. So that's kind of got me started on a lot of the research that I do. So the first thing I kind of want to go over is just like the basics, which is what is UDL? So Universal Design for Learning is kind of like what I like to call a toolbox for everyone on campuses, looking at higher education, but also just for classrooms and other settings outside of college courses as well. And it provides just the best access for every student that we come into contact with, provides them with the best way for them to have access to the information we provide, as well as the best avenue for success we often find. And another question I get a lot is like, why do we care? Why do we care so much about, shifting from older viewpoints into UDL? I think the best answer for that, especially as someone who has experienced it, is that every student is different. We see students who learn in a huge array of ways, and sometimes they don't learn by reading a textbook or listening to you talk, over a lecture in class, things like that. And so providing those multimodal avenues is really helpful for a lot of students to feel like they belong in the classroom, especially for a lot of students who've struggled in the past and they don't feel like they're maybe like the best at academic settings. And one of the things that I noticed a lot during my research is, unfortunately, we often find that UDL is more widely accepted when it is the answer to a problem. So when I say that, I mean, if I had come into a meeting and we weren't really having any accessibility issues that were being brought up, we didn't have a whole bunch of education accessibility issues, then when UDL gets brought up, a lot of times it comes with a lot of not necessarily backlash, but just kind of like a barrier to start implementing those things, because people are worried about changing the structure. And we see it a lot more widely accepted when there's already an issue of accessibility on a campus, because then it's kind of proposed as a answer to an issue, as opposed to just something we could always do to be better and work to be better. And so I kind of look at my studio that I work in. I work on campus with CXC in Studio 151 as a writing mentor, and I work with the vast majority of our students who are registered with ODS, and even just students who aren't registered who have some sort of neurodivergency that benefit from kind of a UDL setup. So I like to always kind of plug the studio a little bit and look at like what we are doing. I think the biggest example of that, especially for me, is the absolute acceptance and work that they've done to help me as a student and as a mentor with my needs, sensory needs, space needs, things like that. But we kind of do that for everyone here. We have a huge setup for multimodal communication. We do our best throughout all of our sessions to just really try to give the students the most diversity in content that we can in order to reach them on some level. And so before I open up into some kind of discussion questions, I always like to kind of give a couple of my, favorite stories with a couple of students that I've had. And the first being a student who came in over a year ago with me and came in with just having a really, really hard time communicating with me, communicating with other members of our team. His writing was really struggling. He was having a hard time communicating with his professor. He wasn't understanding assignments. And so we worked really hard on getting him started with, some kind of setup to help him really just have that basic access to even things like the assignment sheets and what he was being asked of him. And so he started off, he would only schedule with me after he had already failed an assignment. And then we would kind of go through and try to figure out what happened. And then about a year later, he actually graduated last semester, but that last semester he was coming to me every week, several times a week with all of his writing assignments. I could see the change in the confidence he had with what he was writing. His writing was not only, better conventionally, but I could tell that he was more confident expressing what he knew about his topics, which was honestly just a vast information base. So that was really cool for me to see. And just a couple other students that have come in. I had a deaf student who was looking for some help, and I was able to get them connected with the deaf community on campus, as well as the deaf community in Baton Rouge. And so things like that are really important to me, just providing an access point for resources for all sorts of students with diagnoses, no diagnoses, who just need some help, having a better access to their education materials other than that standard, Moodle page syllabus setup. So the first thing that I kind of wanted to open up for discussion is how familiar are you guys with UDL principles, guidelines? What's your understanding of UDL? And if you're not familiar with it, what are some areas that, just with a basic understanding of UDL that you're hoping you can maybe expand in or change up a little bit?
So I came in a little bit late. Can you just say UDL is a abbreviation for?
Yes, so UDL is an abbreviation for Universal Design for Learning, which is kind of this toolbox that we're starting to see pop up with just some tools for universities, classrooms, all sorts of education centers, and kind of expanding out of education centers as well to provide better access with multiple, what I like to call multiple modalities, just different access points to information. To make that information a little bit more accessible to students who don't learn in that traditional, like, cut and dry lecture setup.
I'm sorry if that was a repeat of thing you've already stated. I appreciate the explanation.
Yeah, no, of course. So I know that within our accommodation system, I know, like, our Office of Disability Services here, I know that they are at least somewhat familiar with UDL. But I do know that a lot of people, professors especially, I see a lot of professors kind of on two ends of the spectrum, really, which are either, excited to learn about it and try to implement it. And then we get a lot of people who are kind of hesitant to really see, I guess, the changes that you'd have to make to a classroom, which I can totally understand as a professor. I'm sure it can be daunting with so much. It looks like so much to change, but the reality of the situation is that UDL is kind of ever changing. It's not some one set of rules that you change and then that's kind of the end of it. It's this ever-changing thing that we're looking at constantly to see, what can we do to best serve our students. And so, let's see. So a couple of things I just kind of want to, like, open up to talk about were on campus, what are some physical spaces that, maybe we're seeing? Right. Okay. So we have a question. I'm not familiar with UDL. Okay. So our student athletes. Yes. So I think the biggest thing as a mentor that I do kind of as like a base for UDL is, which like I specify in writing. So that's kind of where I come from. But my basic, like from the get-go, when I'm getting a student in, especially one that I have never met with before, so I'm not really familiar with, which modes of learning that they are, most familiar with or that they do best with. The very first thing that I like to do is get an assignment sheet for whatever we're working on and kind of start to read through that and ask questions along the way. Honestly, to kind of get an idea of what their understanding of the assignment is, because I find that a lot of times it's not necessarily an issue of they don't have an answer to the question, they just misunderstood the question in the first place. So I do a lot of kind of vetting out those kind of issues, trying to figure out, where maybe that block is, because I see students who need help. They're coming to me for a reason. So after we've kind of gone through that assignment sheet and gotten an idea of, what's being asked of us, I like to try to figure out what information they've been given. So if it is a class where they are reading different books, different stories, different articles, and they're trying to, write about those, looking at what texts they've been given, looking at, if there have been lectures in the class, do we have notes for that? Do we have PowerPoints? Really just getting the basic layout of information kind of as a starting point. And then I kind of put all of that away to the side and I just kind of talk to my students, because a lot of times I see that students get really caught up in what they've either already written or what's on the assignment sheet, and they have a hard time thinking through what they are trying to communicate. So we kind of put everything aside and I just kind of have them talk to me about what they want to write about, which I think is really helpful for me as a mentor and for them as a student to kind of step away from a second from the structure of an assignment and get an idea about what frame we're taking on this. And then I write things out a lot. So I will, as I'm listening to them, as I'm going through things, I'm writing down, assignment, like different parts of the assignment. I'm writing down kind of what they're communicating to me that they need from the appointment. And I find that providing them with like a physical sheet of paper at the very end of our sessions has been really helpful. I get a lot of positive feedback with that. Especially when working on like outlining or kind of putting together like where our resources are going to go, providing them with kind of like this handwritten thing that you wrote out in less of an academic tone and a little bit more of informal writing style really helps them to kind of feel more connected to it. I pull up all sorts of websites I get a lot of questions about like resource citing. I have links to websites on hand. We have books in the studio that I can provide. I could talk them through it. I oftentimes will write out examples using one of the resources that they've already given me with whatever citation style they're using. It's really just a matter of I try my best to provide them with as many different sources of material as I can so that, the hope is one of them will click. I have a lot of students who they doodle throughout our sessions. It helps them to think, it helps them to, work through whatever they're talking to me about, thinking about. I try really hard not to force any kind of like overt eye contact. If they're comfortable with that, they will do it. I kind of just take the student's lead on like social cues. I myself have a really hard time with eye contact with students. So I know how hard it can be to come into an academic setting, needing help and then continuing to have to try to mask while you're in there. It's exhausting for them and for me. So it's kind of a guessing game, really, for, what's working, what's not working, reading the room, reading the student, and just kind of getting a baseline for what they're receptive to. I think is the best thing to the best way to put it is what am I doing that I'm seeing is productive for them, which can be a little hard sometimes with one-time students, but I think in the Cox Center, I think you guys get the same people like over and over again, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that in that case it's really helpful because you have time to like kind of familiarize yourself with that student, the way they're studying, the way that they are participating in your sessions, all sorts of different aspects of their education experience, which is going to be different from person to person. As
I
far
will
as
say that's
understanding,
one thing that's cool about our centers that we do. We get young men and young women who are here 4 to 5 years, and we can build that relationship. Opposed to you all may meet someone and they may come in once a year. It's hard to build that rapport, and even with us, we're able to build that relationship. They come in on a consistent basis. We're able to learn their learning styles and then kind of go from there too. So it is a little different. I definitely can see the challenges that you have to face opposed to what we may have to deal with as well. But yeah, I just wanted to chime in on that.
oh yeah, of course, no, yeah, I always love having students who come back, because I am able to actually get a feel for them and their experience, and kind of have a chance at that like ever changing accessibility route, because I get a student one time and I can only do so much for them in that first session. But I really did find that once I started doing a lot of these things and providing a lot of these, different routes to their information, I got a lot of returning people. So I'd say probably like off the cuff, probably at least 50% or more of my students that I see come back to me, if not regularly, then whatever assignment that they've started on, they will reschedule with me several times to finish that assignment and see it through. So I have definitely seen the change in my like returning rates, which I really appreciate seeing, because it lets me know that I'm doing something right as a mentor. Not to say that them not coming back is not the case, but it lets me know that what I'm doing is helping them. So that's always been a really cool thing to get to experience sometimes.
Right.
So I know I talk a lot about writing assignments, which can be kind of a niche, right? Because we're not all working on writing assignments. I know Cox has tutors for literally all sorts of classes and assignments and all the different majors and everything. But I think that UDL is one of those things that's kind of not necessarily easy, but something that you can carry over to different subjects pretty effectively. So as far as understanding classes as a whole, I really, really encourage students to talk to their professors. It can be super scary for a lot of new kids, especially freshmen. They don't want to interact with their professors. They've never had to do it before. But I really, really encourage students to talk to their professors, because 9 out of 10 times their professors are so very willing to work with them to figure out what works best, because they want them to succeed in that class, which has been pretty helpful in some classes. I've had students who were able to, get different resources from the professors that they weren't getting before that was really helpful. So I want to kind of see, if anybody's comfortable talking, what's your connection to UDL? Like what interested you in UDL as a topic?
So I do see some questions, Jay. I'm
Oh, am
not
I
sure.
missing some? Oh, yes, I am.
There we
All right, let me see what we got. Okay, so Sarah. When asking about resources, are we talking about like the studio's resources or resources from like my research personally? So as far as campus resources, I have found that sometimes it's kind of hard for these kids to access. It can be kind of hard to access resources because they don't know where to look, and they don't know who to ask. And so honestly, the very best thing that I found, especially with our communication center, we've really started pushing kind of like advertisement so that kids can come in. The campus advisors sometimes refer them to us. We're seeing a little bit more of that recently than we have in the past. But a lot of times, like, we kind of send out business cards and things like that to professors to encourage them to, tell their students like, hey, if you're writing a paper, if you're giving a speech, if you're doing a presentation, anything like that, CXC has resources for that. But we also have specific courses that are communication intensive, CI courses, and they actually kind of plug directly to us for students because they are like presentation writing heavy. They push those kind of communication modalities. But for resources, I really would suggest like having your student, just like letting them know that we're here, and having them pop in sometime to ask the people who work here, about the resources that we can provide. We also, like, during sessions, we have links to everything kind of like saved in a like Moodle page. So as we are working through our sessions, we are constantly providing them with links and emails to people and different offices and all sorts of different resources. As far as orientation, it has been about 4 years for me since I did orientation. So I may not have like the recent information on that, but as far as my experience there, I did not really get a lot of information through orientation. They do tell us about the Office of Disability Services, but at the time, I was unaware that I would benefit from services. I actually only started my services this year after finding out that I was autistic, and that ODS was very helpful for me. So I really think that it's about, a big thing is like talking to your student, encouraging them to reach out, because that's kind of the biggest barrier I see is kind of a fear of asking for help, which is totally understandable. I was there my freshman year. So I have the next message. Right. Okay. So this is one of my favorite topics. Nonverbal communication. I work a lot with nonverbal autistic students, and nonverbal individuals as a whole. So this is kind of one of the things that I've been really looking at recently. So I'm a communication disorders major, and I am studying to be an SLP. And so one of the problems that my fellow classmates and I have been having in the last couple of years is, as a foreign language, we wanted to take ASL. It is incredibly important to us to be able to communicate with nonverbal children, deaf individuals, all sorts of different modalities of communication. And LSU, one, does not offer ASL. And I'm 90% sure they don't have just a designated class. We do have a manual communication class, but it is not just specified for ASL, and it is only one semester, and it does not count toward foreign language. And so I was really excited to see a lot of my ComD students that I, am in classes with. We started a petition and really started kind of talking to the university about the importance of nonverbal communication and different modes of communication. So that's one thing that's kind of been happening on campus that I'm really excited about, and I really do hope that that comes through and that the university takes steps to change that. But as far as nonverbal communication within our studio, we don't really see a lot of entirely nonverbal students. In fact, I don't think I've had any, excuse me, I have not had any entirely nonverbal students come into me yet. But as far as the judgment goes, that is something that I totally understand. And it's heartbreaking to see, but our studio works really hard to provide communication for everyone. So I think the biggest thing with that sort of situation would be, just providing the context for our mentors when signing up that, they are nonverbal and whatever form of communication that they prefer. To me, I would say that a session with a nonverbal individual would go much like a session with anyone else, honestly. We are able to, without that feedback side, I'm still able to provide kind of a layout of like, okay, this is what we're going to do during this session. I'm still able to read through the resources that they can give me from their classes. I'm still able to, talk through some outlining, talk through, assignments that they already have done. Of course, it is always a little bit more difficult not to be able to get verbal feedback, but at the same time, I find that verbal communication is not the only valid form of communication. And there are lots of different indicators from our students that we receive, even with verbal students, who are nonverbal, as in, we kind of just have to read the person, body language, nonverbal communication as far as just head nodding, gestures, things like that, written communication, all sorts of things. But I would really love to see more training with that. I would. I'm actually currently working on some accessibility training for our studio. And so that is actually a really good point, and I'm glad that you brought that up because that is something that I would actually really love to put into that accessibility training. I'm going to write that down. Sorry. Give me 1 second.
So Jay, this is Dawn from Disability Services.
Yes.
My comment was really geared towards having students come in with learning differences in a tutoring scenario, that tutors be aware of the nonverbal communication that they may be sending during their tutoring session, specifically when it comes to understanding assignments, because the way that the assignment is being presented may not be understood by the student, and that could kind of leave like a puzzled look on a tutor's face, and that could lead to a student shutting down and not seeking the assistance. And it's difficult because we have so many students registered with our office, that may have learning challenges that rise to the level of a learning disability, but that information is not shared necessarily with a tutor. So if they had that information, it would certainly be helpful, but it's likely that students aren't going to share that information with their tutor. So they could be coming in at different levels of understanding. One of the things that I have found to be really helpful in speaking to students that may have these learning differences is to ask them to repeat back to me in their own words what they think they heard, right? So we're looking at expressive and receptive language, and then kind of finding, is it, if there's a a difference in what was heard than what was said, where did that breakdown occur? Is it a vocabulary issue, or is it a language issue?
Yeah, so that is something that we do deal with quite a bit. And as someone who works with disability services for my own accommodations, as well as someone who's just like grown up in the education system with accommodation needs, that is something that I think I kind of do that unintentionally. And I'm working with other mentors to kind of intentionally do that with other students. One of the biggest things that I find with writing assignments specifically, because that's where I specialize, especially when reading a paper that someone's already brought into me, I stop pretty much every paragraph or so, and I will verbalize what I understood from the paragraph and ask them if what I understood from the paragraph is the message that they were intending to put out, which I find helps a lot, like you said, because it doesn't force them to kind of come up with it. Sometimes when they're forced to kind of just like start up with what they meant to say, I find that sometimes we get a little bit of a hesitation because they don't want to give the wrong answer. And so that has really helped me because I'm able to tell them as a reader what I understood, and then they are able to, confirm or deny if that's what they intended. And if not, then we work on a lot of breakdown of where did that communication breakdown happen and how can we repair that communication, which oftentimes is really just, I find, a semantic matter where their phrasing was just different, or, a lot of times we see the way that they've worded their writing is different than what, kind of like you said, that expressive and receptive vocabulary kind of starts to gray area. But yes, that is something that I think is very important, and that I am working on in my accessibility training for my fellow mentors, which what brings me to another question that I kind of wanted to ask everyone is that I am setting up that training for my other mentors. And so I'd really like to hear about, as far as accessibility training goes, accessibility and awareness, what are some other things that maybe you think would be helpful for mentors to be aware of or have more training on?
I'll say, I don't really know that it's training, but I think knowing areas to refer students, because there's so much information on LSU that, it's people don't understand or know that certain resources exist on campus. So, if they pick up on something that they think they could be, teamed up with another agency on campus that's offering a service to them, maybe just a referral list of just common resources that students may benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would actually be really beneficial because, as an incoming student, I really struggled finding resources by no fault of the university. It's a huge university with, a mile-long list of resources, but because of that, sometimes it's hard to pinpoint exactly, what you're looking for. So I do think that would be, I think that would be really beneficial to our students, especially as something kind of just as like a handout that we can give to them, and they can take on their own time, which I find for a lot of students is very helpful because they get very overwhelmed if we're just throwing resources at them. So yeah, I do really think that would be a really good idea. Yeah. Okay. So I had a message in the chat about reading comprehension and websites and apps that read aloud. So I think that that's actually a really good point. if you have some links to any websites that you've used that you do, that you found that are pretty usable, I would love to get those, because I have been working on that kind of thing and I have really struggled to find sometimes like free and accessible websites and apps that will just turn like a document they've been given into something that can be read aloud. I use Speechify and try to get my students to use it as well, which is like a browser extension that will just read whatever document out loud for you. You can pick the pacing and the accents and all sorts of things. So that's been incredibly helpful. And I do want to say too, when I say training, I guess I mean it in a little bit less of a formal sense. We go through like a month-long session of like trainings where we're just kind of equipped with information. So when I think of training, these are definitely the kind of things that I'm looking for, which is, information that I can give to these students, information that I can give to other mentors to help them be better prepared, all sorts of things like that. And there is another thing that I wanted to share. This is my second go round with this kind of open discussion set up, and I have a Google Drive where I have some like links to resources for research that I've done. And I think that we have like an open folder for, I'm creating a folder for some kind of things like this where I'm collecting kind of those campus resources and things like, oh yeah, thank you for the link. Things like those links that are helpful for students, so that I and future mentors have a kind of like a starting point for kind of all things resource that we can hand out. So I definitely encourage anyone who's interested to join that Google Drive, and feel free to put in any research, any helpful websites, helpful articles, literally anything that you think would be helpful for a community of people interested in UDL, because I find that this is one of the best ways to find new helpful things, is people who are also interested in it and working to develop that community space. And so that's kind of all I have prepared, formally. Oh, here you go, another message. Yeah, so I think that would be that's one thing that I kind of struggle with, is building that rapport with short-term students, because we get a lot of like one-off appointments. And so I think that, yeah, kind of developing a way in which we can try to get a better relationship with them. We struggle a little bit with it because we have a limited amount of time. So we have 30 minutes with each appointment, which is where I've kind of hit my blockage, is finding things like icebreaker questions or, anything to kind of build that rapport with the student, but still having that enough time to go through the assignment that they need. Because I get a lot of students who have a mass amount of like stuff that they want to get through in 30 minutes. They're coming in 2 days before the due date and they're kind of, Hail Marying through the situation. And I am totally down for that at all times. But it does kind of make it a little difficult sometimes to provide them with the best, avenues of accessibility to their education and their materials that they're learning. So that is definitely something that I'm also kind of actively and always trying to figure out, with new students, is what can I do here to connect with that student enough that they feel comfortable and open enough to work with me in a way that is beneficial for them. Yeah, so they can schedule back to back. They can schedule as much time as they want, kind of in a block. We do 30-minute sections, but I've had students who will schedule with me for like 2+ hours to get through some like big projects. So that's something we provide, and I try to inform them of as much as possible. because it really is helpful when they have, more than 30 minutes for big stuff. But that's kind of up to them to schedule on their end and like pick that extended time period. Which I've also noticed that I started offering evening hours and weekend hours as well to kind of accommodate for more students and their time needs with working and things. So I've also found that that's really helpful. They'll schedule longer periods of time during evenings and weekends because they have more time to do it. So that's kind of all I had formally put together to talk about. But if there's anything that anyone wants to add, any questions, anything that they've seen that they think is kind of cool for accessibility stuff, feel free.
I just want to say, I wasn't super familiar with the services, even though I work here. I'm more like on the administrative side, but now that I have a child coming to school here, it's certainly piqued my interest of, the different resources that we have. And I think it's really important that our incoming students, I would love to know when he finally chooses his orientation date, what the resources are that they talk about in the orientation, because I really think it's important for students to know that these things are available. So, I'll be looking for that. I'll be asking him to kind of report back to me and let me know if this is something that he's told about when he goes through the orientation. And just, in general, not just at LSU, but just in general, I think it's important that students know that they have the Office of Disability Services and that they have these types of resources available to them to succeed. I don't think that, college is going to be something that's going to just come super easy to him. So I think it's going to be important. So I really appreciate the information and, you sharing your experiences with us as well. Definitely have piqued my interest in it. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree. It's sometimes disappointing to see how little information, the students are able to access regarding resources. And it really is so important, especially for students who don't see themselves as someone who needs accommodations or needs extra material. Because that was me. I was an honors kid growing up. And once I hit college, it hit me like a brick wall. So yeah, I definitely agree that it's so important for these kids to just know that they have the resources. They don't have to use them. They can if they want to, but knowing that they're there is incredibly important.
And I would just like to, this is Dawn again from Disability Services, just to, the Cox Communication Center staff they're just amazing at referring students that they know once they start LSU as needing the additional support. So we get early referrals from them, but across the campus, because of the vast amount of information on LSU, we actually register more juniors and seniors than freshmen and sophomores because they don't have that information. So we oftentimes, and we're so thankful for it, but it's really a team approach on campus that we need referrals from referrals from instructors or folks across the campus to say, hey, have you stopped in to see the folks at Disability Services? I really feel like, they may be able to help. And then we can kind of take it from there. They can reach out to our office and we can let them know what's needed in order to register. But too often we see them come in as juniors and seniors and they've really been suffering, doing their very best, but it has not been as enjoyable as an experience as, we all hope students have, but also very often they're just not very successful either. So, we want to see students graduate and we are available, but just as many referrals as possible to our office would, I think, really improve the experience for students.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my experience, pretty much down to the letter. I came in and didn't do anything for 3 years with accommodations because I really didn't think that I was able to. I think that a lot of times accommodations kind of feels like something for people with very specific diagnoses and very specific disorders and things, when at the end of the day, it's really for anybody who just needs a little bit of help to do good on their classes. And it has helped me tremendously. And I really want to say thank you guys for, you guys down in ODS, because y'all are amazing. Y'all do so much, and like y'all provide students with such a like comforting space, and you know, to get work done. So that is, you know, applause for that
Thanks,
one,
Jen.
honestly.
Well, we appreciate the kind words. I'll pass that on to the team, but most people on campus don't realize that we have over 2,400 students registered with our office. Most of the disabilities that students have in our office are hidden disabilities. And you're right. Most people think that, you know, it's a physical, visible disability, but the truth is that most folks are coming in with those hidden disabilities. But we are here. Accommodations work, right? They just help with the test and learning. They still need to do their part, but we try to level the playing field with accommodation. So anyways, I will pass your thanks on to our team.
Yes, absolutely. And if at any time, I would especially love to try to figure out a way to get more teachers referring students, because they kind of get that firsthand experience with those kids, where I think they kind of get, for students who don't know that they can get accommodation, they're kind of that first step that's closest to the student that sees, hey, maybe you could benefit from some of those accommodations. So like, if you guys ever have any ideas on how to kind of that we can help with on getting those accommodations from professors, we would love to hear them, because that's always something that I think would be really helpful as well.
Thank you. We do a lot of outreach on campus with colleges and such, but it just seems like the more people that are aware of our services, you know, more referrals we'll get, because they don't always come from instructors. We do get them from the cast, we get them from cares, you know, we'll get them from different departments, but we are here and able to help and want to help students.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for taking time out of the day to come and listen to me talk about my my little special interest. It's always something that I love to do. So thank you guys so much for coming.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a QR code for you all to be sure and fill out an evaluation on the session, just to give us some feedback. And yeah, so please feel free to do that. So any given point in time, and thank you all for attending.
Alrighty. You want me to stick around for any amount of time, or?
No, I'd say once Caden right there is off, we are good to go.
Heck yeah. Got more people than I thought I would.
Hey, darn Skippy. I mean, I knew it was going to be more than, you know, the 2 quota, but
Yeah.
hey, here we are.
I think last
no.
time I had like 5, so like 9 is impressive.
Look, hey, I'll take it. I don't know about you, but I will take it. And I thought you did a great job
every
too,
day of the week.
but yeah, I don't know if you actually know Dawn, but she's a great resource.
Yeah, I've had to email her a couple times for some studio stuff, so it was really nice to have her in here.
Yeah, no, she's great. So you definitely try to connect with her if you can too. She's a great resource.
Yeah, absolutely.
But really appreciate you. You have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
Later.